Next, NASA says its Voyager 1 probe, the most distant human-made object in the universe, is sending usable information to Earth again.
It began with silence, not the kind you find in a quiet room or on a still morning. This was the kind of silence that felt like the universe holding its breath, the kind that stretches so wide and deep it feels like it could swallow time. For decades, Voyager 1 had spoken to us from the dark, just a faint whisper from billions of miles away. We had grown used to it, this ghostly voice from the edge of the solar system. It had become a lullaby for the curious, a hum in the background of human ambition. And then, nothing. No signal. No data. No heartbeat from the machine that had refused to die. In that moment, every screen, every receiver, every hopeful eye turned toward the void, waiting for something, anything to break the silence. People who had never met Voyager suddenly felt the weight of its absence, not because it was just a spacecraft, but because it was our spacecraft, our oldest traveler, the furthest piece of us ever sent from home. For hours, the silence stretched, and then it came, a burst, a whisper returned not with words but with a final breath that felt deliberate. The data started like any other routine check, radiation levels, instrument feedback, telemetry. But then, it twisted, it bent. Something inside the signal cracked open like a shell, and what spilled out was unlike anything anyone had ever seen. Not just strange, impossible. Patterns that danced just outside of comprehension. Numbers that resembled the golden spiral, but warped, refracted through some unseen lens. Energy readings that didn't just break the rules, they rewrote them. Inside NASA's deep space network, where calm and routine rule supreme, the air shifted. Fingers hovered over keyboards. People forgot to blink. It was like hearing a foreign language that felt familiar, like a memory you couldn't place but knew you had. Engineers and scientists stared at the data, trying to make sense of what Voyager had screamed across the void in its final breath. Not an accident, not a malfunction. Something intended. It wasn't static. It wasn't noise. It was designed. And then just as suddenly as it had come, it ended. The transmission cut off, not faded, not garbled, just gone. Like a light switched off in a cavern so deep the darkness felt alive. And in that final moment, a shiver ran down the spine of everyone listening. Not because of what they lost, but because of what might have just been found. Around the world, telescopes turned, phone lines lit up. Scientists who'd never spoken before were suddenly in the same digital room, staring at the same strings of numbers, the same irregular waves, the same impossible truth. Something had touched Voyager, or Voyager had touched something. Something waiting just beyond the boundary where our sun's light fades into the great unknown. The message didn't speak of danger, it didn't shout, it sang, a low, mournful tune in the language of math and magnetism. But there was harmony in it, an intelligence layered in notes we didn't yet know how to read. This wasn't just data, it was communication. Not a conversation, but a declaration. A quiet announcement from the dark that we were not alone. And as Voyager's signal fell into permanent silence, something changed on Earth. People who had never looked up before suddenly found their eyes drawn to the sky. Something inside the human spirit stirred. Not fear, not hope. Something older, deeper. Recognition. Voyager didn't die with a whimper. It left us with a question so profound, it might take generations to understand. What had it seen? What had it heard? What in those final seconds had reached back? The days that followed were not like any others. Inside hushed rooms and glowing laboratories, the brightest minds gathered not just to analyze, but to listen, and not just with instruments or equations, but with something more ancient, intuition. The kind of instinct humanity has always turned to when standing at the edge of a great unknown. What Voyager 1 had sent was not gibberish. It was not static or malfunction. It was far too clean, too calculated. Frequencies rose and fell with eerie elegance, forming structures within the noise, patterns so close to our own mathematics, and yet just beyond our reach, as if someone had taken the rules we know and bent them with a different kind of gravity. like looking into a mirror that almost reflects your face, but not quite. And the unease that settled in was not fear of a threat, but of comprehension, that this wasn't just an artifact, it was a message, one not intended to be fully understood, only noticed. For a while, it felt like the earth held its breath. No one wanted to say the word out loud, but it lingered in the air like static electricity, contact, not science fiction, not fantasy, but something that came not with lights in the sky, but through the whisper of a dying machine that had wandered too far and seen too much. It was all too poetic to be real, and yet here it was, data that defied our physics, signs embedded in the chaos, the echo of design where there should have been silence. Voyager had not collided with anything. It had simply passed through something else. A place in space that doesn't behave like space. A crack in the veil we thought we understood. And for one fragile moment, that veil lifted. The strange thing wasn't just what Voyager 1 found, but when it found it. After all these years, after power-saving mode, after power-saving mode, with barely enough energy to blink a single sensor, that's when it happened. As if the universe was waiting for the last whisper, the last breath, to hand us something precious before the silence returned. And what followed wasn't chaos. It was reverence. Telescope arrays turned toward the region of sky where the signal had last originated. But it was blank, still, peaceful in the visible light, untouched in the radio waves. There was nothing there, and that somehow made it all the more disturbing. Because whatever had brushed against Voyager had left no footprint, only a memory. Across nations, barriers fell. Rival governments shared encrypted transmissions, not because of politics, but because of wonder. It was a rare moment where no one argued about ownership or military use. Everyone just watched. Everyone just listened. It was as if the stars had given us a shared dream. And then came the quiet meetings. Physicists muttering about violations of quantum laws. Linguists staring at waveforms like poetry. Mathematicians trying to untangle ratios embedded in radiation signatures. Artists drawing what they felt when they saw the data. No one could explain it, not entirely, but all of them, whether scientist or skeptic, felt the same thing at the core. This meant something. This wasn't a story about aliens and ships. There were no eyes, no faces, no voices. It was more subtle than that, like a footprint left in the snow when no one saw it fall. Something had moved through space where nothing should have moved. Something had noticed a tiny man-made traveler and just for a moment acknowledged it. And in doing so, it acknowledged us. Voyager 1 didn't just send us a message. It handed us a mirror, a reflection from the edge of everything, where humanity's reach met the unknown and was touched in return. Voyager 1 now drifts without power, without voice, just a dark fragment of human ingenuity floating in a sea of silence. But its final act echoes louder than anything it ever sent before. It's not transmitting anymore, but somehow it's still speaking, in the minds of those who've seen the data, in the late-night conversations between scientists who now hesitate to call the universe empty, in the quiet moments when someone looks up at the stars and wonders if something looked back. And for the first time in generations, humanity feels the weight of being noticed. We had always hoped to find something out there, but we never imagined it would come like this. Not in blinding light, not in glorious noise, but in the dying breath of an aging probe, long forgotten by the world that sent it. That's what makes it beautiful. That's what makes it real. Because it wasn't meant to be history. It just became it. The final transmission didn't say hello. It didn't say goodbye. It said, look deeper. It said, the story isn't over. People are still poring over the data, hoping for meaning in the math, for purpose in the pattern. But what Voyager left us wasn't just information. It was wonder. It reminded us that knowledge alone isn't enough, that sometimes the most important discoveries are the ones that change how we feel about everything we thought we knew. In homes, classrooms, observatories, everywhere someone dares to dream, there's a shift, a subtle change in how we think about space, not just as a void, but as a place that may be watching, listening, or simply waiting for us to catch up. Because if Voyager 1 could find something, then so could we. One probe, one last message, one quiet moment that stopped the world. Not with fear, but with awe. Not because we were threatened, but because we were seen. And that's what lingers. Not the data, not the spike in frequencies, but the feeling. That moment when the silence wasn't empty anymore. It was full, full of presence, full of meaning, full of possibility. Voyager didn't just teach us about the planets, it reminded us what it means to reach, to wonder, to go further than we were ever meant to go, and find something waiting in the dark. Whatever touched Voyager, whoever, whatever left that trace behind, it didn't answer every question, but it asked a better one. And now we listen, not just with machines, but with hope.